Hello. Thank you for joining me for another Sunday Afternoons with Reverend Lucretia. I am so glad that you are here and able to participate either live or online. And so we're going to be talking today. The name of the talk is Don't Drive on Empty. And the song title is Who I'm Meant to Be. So we talked a couple of weeks ago about morning meds, and that was how to support ourselves spiritually and emotionally. And we talked about prayer and meditation and affirmations. And so today we're going to be talking about the physical side of that. So let me start off by reading some of the lyrics to you so you can understand why I chose this song and why it is so meaningful. So the song is called Who I Am Meant to Be. It is by Anthem Lights. And if you would like to listen to it before you listen to the talk, just go ahead and click on the link. It will be in the description down below. Every day I run a race just trying to get ahead. Don't think about where I am now, just where I want to be instead. I'm losing so much precious time, but will I be satisfied in the end? I know I was made with a purpose to reach past the surface, live life fearlessly. I want nothing less than to be who I'm meant to be. And so we can only be our best selves by taking care of our physical, emotional, and our spiritual needs. We're going to talk about how to nurture yourself, about sleep, and about food. As the song says, we want to be our best selves and treat ourselves with love and compassion. And there are consequences when we do not. So in an article called Self-Care, Why It Is So Important and Why It Is So Hard by Jacqueline Gethius, the author describes the consequences of not practicing self-care. They are low energy, feeling hopeless, less patience, increased headaches, stomach aches, and other physical symptoms, difficulty falling and staying asleep, challenges in choosing healthy food, the urge to eat comfort food, worsening mental health, depression or anxiety, feeling burnout, difficulty concentrating, strained and distancing relationships with your spouse or partner, reduced performance at work, and less motivation to engage in social activities. So the greatest threat to our well-being is stress, and that includes what we put in our bodies and what we put in our minds. And we talked about in Morning Meds how to help you with what you're putting in your minds. Some of the most stressful things we put in our body are sugar, alcohol, excessive caffeine, and processed foods. Susanna Joy Winters writes in the article Self-Care Made Simple that we are in denial about what we need to do to take care of ourselves. She specifies 3 things that she thinks that we need to do every day, and they include watching our diet and meditation and exercise. She talks about a diet that consists of fruits, vegetables, and plant-based foods. She talks about the ability for meditation to heal us because it is the silence that is the healing part. She says we are bombarded by noise outside and inside. There is research that shows that we have 60,000 thoughts a day, and for some of us, 80% of those are negative. So she talks about movement is necessary for a healthy body. That can be walking, running, dancing, yoga. That creates endorphins and improves sleep. And she said just 10 minutes a day will make a difference. And she also talks about time in nature improves the mood, reduces stress, and improves cognitive function. So there is a practice that is called earthing. And earthing is any time that you are in direct contact with the earth. So when you take your shoes off, when you go and walk in the grass, when you walk on the beach in the sand, when you put your hands in the dirt and you're working in your garden, that is all called earthing. So earthing causes reduction of inflammation, and this can be documented by infrared imaging and white blood cell counts, reduced stress and improved sleep and improved circulation. So she says you need just 30 minutes a day of self-care, 10 minutes of quiet, 10 minutes of movement, and 10 minutes in nature plus a healthy diet. She says it's about showing up for yourself every day. So I ask you, what would happen if you actually showed up for yourself every single day instead of just once in a while? Jessica Brubaker explains that adults nurtured us as children, but when we grow up, it's our job to do that nurturing. In an article titled Why Self-Care Isn't Selfish, She explains our parents had 3 jobs: to affirm us so we believe that we are good enough, to meet our needs physically and emotionally, and to set boundaries so we are safe and protected. When we grow up, we are responsible for those activities to meet those needs and to evaluate all of our risks. As adolescents, we are constantly comparing ourselves to others. We get core beliefs that we are not as valuable as other people. Our beliefs about ourselves combine with the experiences that we have as we are getting older, and sometimes we come out with a negative self-image. She said it is our job to heal and nurture and support yourself beyond the things that you do just occasionally, like getting a massage or getting a manicure or going to the gym every once in a while. She says we aren't very good at taking care of ourselves on a day-to-day basis. We often believe we are not worth our own time and energy. We believe other people's needs are more important than ours. Self-care is about nurturing ourselves and having a functional relationship with yourself to affirm and nurture and set boundaries. Ask yourself, how do you take care of your relationship with your best friend? And how do you support your relationship with your partner or husband or significant other? You support them in their goals and encourage them to be their best version of themselves every single day. We make sure that the people know that they matter to us. Are we doing that for ourselves? It's about not neglecting the relationship we have with ourselves. Think about your best friend. Would you ever talk to him or her the way you talk to yourself? That's not nurturing yourself. Your parents took care of you because they thought you were valuable and deserved to be affirmed and nurtured and safe. When you choose to intentionally affirm, intentionally meet your needs, and intentionally set boundaries so you can be protected, you send a message that you matter and that you are valuable. I've learned a lot about self-care over the last several decades. There were times when I took very good care of myself, and there were times when I did not. I actually learned this from a boss of mine. I carry around in my car a jar of peanut butter and a spoon. And when I would get really hungry, I would just pull over and eat some peanut butter. The reality is that's not nurturing myself, and that's not self-care, and that's not being even nice and gentle and kind to myself. You need to actually sit down and have a meal. So while you are putting protein in you, and it is a healthy food, the reality is that's not nurturing. I also used to be sleep deprived, and I also justified it by saying that I was taking naps. But the fact of the matter is I wasn't getting 8 hours sleep. I was getting somewhere around 5 or 6 hours sleep, and that's just not good enough. It turns out sleep is really, really important. It's a really big deal. In an article titled "Sleep is Your Superpower" by Matt Walker, he first discusses the brain and how learning and memory are affected by sleep. He says it's really important after you learn new material to go to sleep because that's like hitting the save button. He also says that the brain is better able to absorb new information after you've slept. It's sort of like a sponge that gets a chance to dry out, and then when you wake up in the morning, you can put in all the new information and it can all expand to its fullest potential. So without sleep, the brain can't absorb new information. So they did a test of people who had 8 hours sleep versus people who pulled an all-nighter. And the ones who pulled the all-nighter were not allowed to have any caffeine, and they were not allowed to have any naps. And they then tested their ability to retain new information. There was a 40% deficit in the people who pulled the all-nighter versus the people who got 8 hours of sleep. So the hippocampus is the part of your brain that receives new memory files. And with 8 hours of sleep, you have the full ability to sleep, to retain all that information. With less than 8 hours, there is absolutely no signal at all. It's like shutting down your memory inbox. Any new files just get bounced and cannot be committed to memory. Also, when you have that very deep sleep, there are powerful brain waves that happen at the deepest level, and that's when you shift the memory from the short-term memory to the long-term memory. So when you don't have 8 hours of that really, really deep sleep, or when you don't have enough of that really, really deep sleep, the brain does not get into that very special place where the waves are able to move the memories from the short term to the long term, and so they don't get absorbed. The disruption of the sleep cycle can be seen in cognitive decline in 1.6 billion people over 70 countries, and that's what happens when we have daylight saving times. So in the spring, when you lose an hour of sleep, there is a 24% increase in heart attacks the next day. In the fall, when you get an hour back, there is a 21% reduction in the heart attacks that they see the next day. This same information holds for car crashes, road traffic accidents, and suicide rates. So let's talk a little bit about the immune system and sleep. So 4 hours of loss of sleep, there's a 70% drop in the killer cell activity. So we have special cells in our brains that kill off dangerous elements and eliminate them, such as cancerous tumors. Evidence has been found that there are suppressed killer cell activity in cancers of the bowel, of the prostate, and the breast when you don't get enough sleep. The World Health Organization has listed any nighttime shift activity as a probable carcinogen because of the disruption of the sleep-wake pattern. So over the last several decades, there have been millions of studies and lots of epidemiological research that gives proof that the shorter sleep cycle you have, the shorter your life is. So they studied 6 hours of sleep versus 8 hours of sleep. And the genetic code in your DNA, 711 genes were distorted. So they were able to see that in the people that had the different amounts of time of sleep. And they saw that half of the genes were upregulated, meaning there were more of them produced, and they related to tumors, long-term inflammation, stress, and cardiovascular disease. And the other half of the DNA cells that were downregulated, there weren't as many of them, were all related to the immune system. So you can see that when you lose sleep, your ability to have your immune system function, the DNA, they can actually see it in the DNA coding in your cells. So he talks about ways to improve your sleep, and he says you need to moderate your caffeine and your alcohol use to establish regular sleep hours every day. He says to have a cool environment, your body needs to cool down 2 to 3 degrees every night to get a good night's sleep, and he says 65 degrees is the optimal temperature to have. He says sleep is not an optional luxury lifestyle, it is a non-negotiable biological necessity life support system. So now let's talk about food. Neil Barnard wrote an article called Power Foods for the Brain. He talks about people who eat saturated fats. So that's things like bacon, cheese, dairy products, milk, meat. If you eat more than 25 grams a day, you are 4 times more likely to get Alzheimer's. And then the trans fats, those are things that are in like donuts and pastries, those contribute to raised levels of cholesterol, heart disease, and also brain dysfunction. So in a study of over 1,000 adults over 50 years old, they were followed for 21 years. They saw that those who ate large amounts of trans and saturated fats were 2 or 3 times more likely to get mild cognitive dysfunction. So not even just Alzheimer's, but the general aging that happens to your brain was much, much worse, 2 to 3 more times worse. And so that includes problems as the inability to remember names and the inability to remember words. So there is good news. Even if you have the Alzheimer's gene, if you avoid saturated and trans fats, the risks of Alzheimer's is 80% reduced. So he said, it was a long study. He said if you take one thing out of this study, take the fact that genes are not your destiny. 80% can be changed by what you eat. So iron and copper get into your brain, and they cause what's called free radicals. You can get iron and copper by using iron pots or copper pots, or if you barbecue out there, you can get some of that iron into your food, into your brain. And so there are also, iron comes from copper pipes. So back in the day, it was much more normal. Now there are still people that have copper pipes, and the water gets through there, and so believe it or not, the copper gets into your brain. So the copper and iron gets into your brain from food as well, and the highest food sources of that are meats and liver. So he says too much of it is toxic. and it singes the connections in your brain. He says it's as if you need a fire extinguisher to put out all the sparks that are happening. Well, there is a fire extinguisher, and that is vitamin E. And vitamin E can be found in spinach, mangoes, nuts, and seeds, and they have antioxidants, which are the elements that knock out the free radicals in the brain. He says you need 8 milligrams a day of vitamin E. He said don't run out and buy some at your drugstore, because by law they can put only one kind of vitamin E in those pills, but the reality is there are 8 different kinds of vitamin E, and you need all 8 of them, and you can get them only from food. So the colors of food also show the level of antioxidants, and the darker the colors, the more beta-carotene and lycopene are in those. So our brains automatically, when we go into the supermarket, we see those bright colors, and those bright colors are telling us that we need to be eating those foods. In the studies of seniors given antioxidants over the course of 3 months, just 3 months, there is evidence they have better memory and their ability to recall is increased. So, what is the most healthy diet? So the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine in 2009 put together a chart of what to eat, and the 4 categories were fruits, grains, legumes, and vegetables. They submitted this to the USDA because they wanted them to make new federal guidelines, and the USDA did not respond, so they actually sued the USDA and said that that triangle thing that they have for the food groups is actually not healthy at all. And so in 2011, the USDA issued new federal guidelines, and their chart contained fruits, grains, vegetables, and proteins, and there was a little circle off to the side for dairy, but there was no part at all for meat. Now they didn't come out and actually say don't eat meat. You could eat meat that would fit into the protein part of it, but they're not putting it on meat as a separate section that they're recommending. So the last step for improving brain function is exercise. So the University of Illinois says 120 adults who did a brisk walk 3 times a week, after 1 year, their brain scan showed the hippocampus, and that's the part that is the seat of retaining new memory. The hippocampus was bigger and bigger, and there was a reversal of the brain shrinkage. So as we get older, the brain naturally shrinks, and this is something that can be reversed. He said it's suggested to start with a 10-minute walk 3 times a week. Eventually, they'd like you to get up to 20, and eventually the final goal would be 40 minutes 3 times a week to improve your memory and reduce the brain shrinkage. So we've seen how self-care is about nurturing yourself emotionally, spiritually, and in your relationship, and it's about eating well and getting exercise and sleeping enough. Now we're going to talk a little bit about scriptural and New Thought references to taking care of yourself. So we are told to love our neighbors over 14 times in the scripture. It is emphasized that only when we love ourselves can we love another. So Mark 12:30-31 says, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your mind and with all your strength." And the second is to love your neighbor as yourself. And Leviticus 19:34 says, "The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself." So Frank Giaducci is a well-known Unity minister and innovative Bible scholar. He received the Charles Fillmore Award in 1995 for his contributions to making Unity well-known throughout the world. He wrote Love Yourself into Wholeness, and he says, "Not loving ourselves is the source of all of our problems and challenges. We are all children of God, children of love, heirs to all that God is. Why don't we fully love ourselves?" And he talks about the fact that we get negative messages as a child, that there is peer pressure, that as we grow older we develop a sense of lack of self-worth. It's because of conditioning, it's because of authority figures. We're taught to love others and not ourselves. We believe it's wrong to love ourselves. Sometimes religious teachings, there are some other denominations that says that you're born a sinner, and they don't encourage us to love ourselves. We are taught that loving ourselves is egotistical, that it's not a good thing to put yourself too high and mighty, that's not good. But actually, loving ourselves is essential to loving others and appreciating and accepting yourself as a child of God. Jesus said, "Love your neighbor as yourself," he says, and the key word in that phrase is "as." It must be honest and unselfish love and appreciation for yourself. You can only love others to the degree that you love yourself, It must manifest as love in your life according to the law of mind action. So he talks about loving all four parts of ourselves: the intellectual, the physical, the emotional, and the spiritual selves. So loving ourselves physically means to change our frame of reference and know that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So as we love ourselves more, we'll be able to love others more, and we'll be able to love our physical self as well. Also, he says, pay attention to all the physical gifts that you have. So if you have talents like being a sportsman, you can love your body for that. Or even just ways of, if you're an artist or a painter or a musician, those are ways that you're physically letting the God self inside you come outside you. And that's ways to love yourself more physically. See the beauty in yourself and see the beauty in everyone else. So appreciating and accepting your physical talents gives us the potential to express ourselves in many different ways. So he says, love the intellectual or thinking self. We all have a brain, and we all have the ability to use it to its full capacity. We all have access to divine ideas. He says to talk about loving our emotional selves or feeling selves, accept all of our feelings that we have without judgment or condemnation, see them as part of ourselves, allow ourselves to express loving feelings and to be vulnerable. Love the spiritual self means seeing ourselves always as a child of God, an individualized experience of God. So he says love is the binding, joining force of divine mind. Concentrate on the divine love, manifest it more often, and it sets into action spiritual energies that open the way to God consciousness. Let that love be towards ourselves. Make love the basis of all of our relations, including with ourselves. Fulfill the law of God and demonstrate divine harmony within and without. So we have many, many, many fabulous women teachers in New Thought. New Thought is one of the one that actually really, really supports women. And so Winifred Wilkinson Hausman, she was the co-founder and the co-minister of the Unity Center Church in Cleveland Heights. So she's best known for her book, Your God-Given Potential, and that talks about developing the 12 powers of man. That was actually used as a textbook for the Unity School of Religious Studies. But the book that I found that was most helpful for this talk was written in 1986, and it's called A Guide to Love-Powered Living. She says, but always there is something that you as an individual can do, and it is your responsibility to do that to prepare for your greater work. Begin by learning to love. Love is the greatest expression of God's power that is available to us. It has been described as cosmic energy, electricity of spirit, universal power of magnetism, and creative energy. Romans 13:10 says, love is the fulfilling of the law. Love is a healer. It repairs, renews, revitalizes, and regenerates. Love is powerful to overcome thoughts and feelings that are destroying an individual's ability to live normally and happily. When you learn to love in the highest, deepest sense, you will learn something else from this inner teacher. You will learn that your body is a gift, but it is actually more of a precious charge than it is an outright gift. You cannot abuse it and expect it to continue to serve you well. Neither can you expect healing under the laws of love if you continue to overeat, overdo, and generally disregard your body's needs. Love teaches you to use your body wisely and to respect its requirements so that it can serve you well. A part of accepting your God-given ability to be healthy, strong, and vital is cooperating with God's laws of health. In other words, respecting your body, making use of its strength and power while caring for it under God direction. Many times you are given from within directions in the use of your physical vehicle of expression. Maybe the voice of love within you says it's time to rest. You then choose whether you stop and follow the instruction or ignore it and work past the point of physical exhaustion. Love works from guidance from within, but even this tremendous power cannot overcome the strain you cause when you go against this guidance. You cannot expect your body to serve you well unless you are willing to respect its needs, and respect is one of the best expressions of love. It isn't necessary to pamper and coddle yourself, but you must be willing to take reasonable care of your body for the best results. Instructions for this reasonable care will come to you from within if you will listen. The little voice speaks for you alone. It is well to learn to heed it, because the little voice is the voice of love, and love is a healer. So here's a story. When I was living in New Jersey, I was trying to save money and I had my own house, so I did all my own landscaping. And there was a tree that needed to be pruned. And so I sawed down a branch and I pulled it towards me because it got all stuck in the leaves up there. I had to pull really hard and I hit my chest. And I said, oh, okay, that hurts. But I just kept on going and I kept on working for days and days, and the pain got really bad. But I thought I had just like pulled a muscle somewhere. So I kept on going for several days until the pain became so intense that I ended up in the ER. And they took all kinds of tests and they couldn't find anything, and they sent me home. And then I got a doctor within about an hour. I got a call from my doctor who said, I've reviewed the scans. You need to go to the emergency room immediately. So I went to the emergency room, and you know how you sign in, you give them your name. They said, oh, no, you go to the front of the line. I went to the front of the line. They took me to the ICU immediately. It turned out I had ruptured my spleen. Well, as you know, people can die from rupturing your spleen. But me, I just sucked it up and kept on working and took painkillers, and that was just stupid, and that was not self-care, and I've learned from that. But what happened was I was in the ICU for several days, and one of my very, very good friends came to me, and he had just suffered a bout of illness, like a cold, because he had been working too hard and his calendar had been too full. And he looked at me and he said, did we do this to ourselves? And I'll never forget that day. That was many years ago, and I came to understand that I am human and my body has limits, and pushing myself harder than I should never serves the goal of being my best self. I continue to make mistakes, but I'm able to see them much more quickly, and I fully understand that God wants me to be healthy and happy and joyous and the highest expression of love that I can possibly imagine. Being who we are meant to be is possible when we nurture, love, and take care of ourselves mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. It is possible as long as we make sure that we never drive on empty. And so it is. Thank you so very much. I hope that this was helpful for you. If you enjoyed it, please click the subscribe or click the little bell button so that you can be notified when we come out with new material. I send you on your way with many blessings. Take good care. Bye-bye.